You made it to the Go Commando Show with Fred Galvin. On our new mission, we contend with the naked truths of health, leadership, and overcoming adversity. Now it's time to Go Commando.
Hi, Commandos. We've got a great guest tonight, Nathan Parker. He is a very diverse professional as he started his career as a United States Marine when he enlisted in the Marine Corps right after high school. He left the Marine Corps where he was trained in telecommunications, and he worked for a telecommunication company where he found with the downsizing, he had to shift, and he moved into the luxury automotive industry. So we're going to talk about his character and how that was defined, where he's always focused on God and his family. He has always maintained a positive mindset no matter what hit him in life, and he's continually advancing. Incredible story. So when we're talking about luxury cars, we always realize that a lot of the Germans don't want to get your car messy. And we have on the GoCommandoShow.com website the Silver Bullet. And this nice tumbler, what's beautiful about it is you can take the little top off and you've got a no-spill little thermos right there. So you can get this for yourself or a gift. Please shop on the website at shop on GoCommandoShow.com. The next thing is, did I hear an echo in here? Well, that's because I've got two of them. Amazon Echo has both the full-size version, which is much better sound quality, or the small version right here, which is 1/4 the size, not quite the best sound quality. But these, when you're getting up and busy throughout the morning, through the rest of the end of the day, they can tell you the weather, they can play songs, they can play your favorite podcasts like the Go Commando Show. They can do so many things for you to make your life easier without having to touch or type anything in there. It's very beautiful. So you can go on the GoCommandoShow.com website, click on the Amazon banner, and you will get led straight to the Amazon, as long as you type in Amazon, and then get yours today. These are $79. The small ones at today's price are $29. You order them right to Amazon, it gets delivered to your door, and we are supported here at GoCommandoShow.com. So get yours today. Thank you. Hey, Commandos, we have an awesome show for you today, and I have a good long-term friend of mine, Nathan Parker. He is a service manager for Mahle Automotive Group here in Kansas City, Missouri. And Nathan, a little bit about his background. He joined the Marines when he was very young, and he got out and he started a career after the Marine Corps in the corporate world, and that's what we're here to discuss today. And his specific leadership and his mindset and vision and how his faith allowed him to get to the position where he is at right now, and he's been very successful. So welcome, Nate, and thank you for coming on the Go Commando Show.
Appreciate it.
Tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how it was before you joined the Marines and what it was like growing up as a little boy.
I had born and raised in Raytown. And
that's here in Kansas
yeah,
City.
it is. It's a suburb of Kansas City. And had an older generation parents. My father was in Korea. My mother and them met just shortly after he got out of Korea. And born and raised here, went to high school, wrestled here at Fort Raytown, and I had three brothers, two sisters, pretty decent-sized family. The normal growing up, arguing, fighting, throwing each other around, and kind of a quiet, dorky kid, but end up still pretty bullheaded.
Right. Now, it was competitive growing up in your family with three brothers, I'm assuming.
It was. My oldest brother is old enough to be my father, and because of my mom had heart conditions, unfortunately, because she's old enough. When she was a young girl, she didn't have good antibiotics, and rheumatic fever took over when she was a kid, damaged her heart valve, and then when she was older, had heart attacks when I was young, and actually died 3 times on the table and survived it. And still pretty weak. Still with us. The doctors didn't think that she'd be around, but very much a tight-knit family, very much a family that loves each other and wasn't going to let anything mess with any of the rest of the family, even though we were competitive, even though my brothers were and I were at each other for who knows what reason.
Right.
No reasons.
Yes. Yeah, that a lot of uncertainty with, that's a big difference between when we grew up and now. They can pretty much, keep almost anybody alive unless they're, completely cold.
Yeah.
But that's amazing that your mother actually died 3 times.
3 times one day. My dad, probably one of the strongest men, one of the best men. As a matter of fact, a book should be written about him.
Wow.
His father abandoned him to raise his 2 younger sisters when he was in the 8th grade with some person he didn't even know in California. Raised them, did everything he could for them, found a family to help take them on, and while he still worked and by any means necessary. And that man then went to Korea and got a couple for the Navy and got a couple boats shot out from underneath of him while running Marines in on the beach.
Wow.
The only man that gets to call me a seagull and bellhop. So,
wow.
So he's the fantastic, mellow, patient, faithful man. Yes. One thing that he will always say is, I never went hungry. Even before I knew the Lord, I never went hungry.
Right.
So he was already taken care of.
And was your father one of those role models that inspired you to join the military, or what put those early seeds to join the service in your mind?
My whole life, I thought I was going in the Air Force. I thought I was going to fly. I thought I was going to get in a cockpit. And 17, I went up to my best friend had already signed, and he was getting ready to go. And he goes, he was at my locker, and he had to ask me the question. He said, how would you like to tell everybody you're a United States Marine? I went home, called the recruiter that night. And that's the basic question everybody always has, and you probably come across it yourself. Everybody always has, I have a son, I have a daughter, I have, or how do I know myself? How do I know I'm supposed to go in?
Right.
I asked him that question. How would you like to tell everybody you're a United States Marine and everything that goes with?
Right.
So, if you can say yes, and I want that title, and I want to be able to understand all of the gravity of that, that's you.
Right.
But if not, then it's not meant for you. And that pushes them right in or right out of that thought process.
Yes. So how old were you when you joined the Marine Corps?
I signed at 17. In matter of fact, my dad had to sign the waiver. He's old enough to think as of an adult, so he can go. And being a vet, he didn't want to, and he made that known. He goes, however, I already knew. He goes, your mom and I knew when you were born.
Wow.
This is what you were going to do. You and your younger brother. And 2 years later, my younger brother went in also.
Wow.
So
at 17 years old, right after high school.
Boom. Yeah, I'm gone. So I couldn't wait. As soon as I don't know what the trigger was. I don't know what that mechanism fully was, except for that question. That question was the catalyst that sparked it, and I knew that's what I had to do, and I knew that's what I needed to be.
Yes. And what led you, as far as determining what kind of job in the Marines? Was that something that you wanted a particular field, or was it kind of told to you, or?
I was told that these were my options. I scored okay on the ASVAB and enough, and the recruiter laid it out and said, "What do you think about radio operator? This is what they do." And I really wasn't thinking anything outside of that. I knew that I didn't have the ability to go to college right away. I knew that I was going to have to figure that out later, and right now, just put me in. And
right.
I understood. It's kind of funny how my background made similar. Well, I guess it's not funny. It does make sense, but it made similar patterns to my father. My father came home. He self-taught himself TVs and radios. He did it all by paper, correspondence. With an 8th grade education, he ended up repairing everything under the sun. TVs, cars, radios, all of it. So, and he had his own workbench in the basement where he would go down and put the oscilloscope and everything else through a TV or through a radio and repair it. So I understood radio frequencies. And
so that made sense to you when they were talking about radio operator.
Yeah, it did.
And your father had a little bit of background doing that.
Yeah.
Now, some of the listeners that don't have the military background, what Nate is mentioning as far as a radio operator, that's not like a radio necessarily in your car or like a boom box. That's a two-way communication system. And before the last major combat before Nathan joined the military the last major fighting was in Vietnam, and radar operators didn't necessarily have a long life expectancy. If you're assigned to an infantry unit, radio operators are the ones that they're aiming to kill.
They know to shoot for the antenna.
Yes. So that had been on your mind as soon as you chose the Marine Corps and radio operator and you went to boot camp.
Yeah.
You knew.
Yes. The probability, if I ever got in combat time, it was to be pretty tough. But I never really thought anything past it. I knew that one way or another, things would be how they're supposed to be.
Right. So you were a competitive athlete in a combative sport like wrestling growing up in high school, and that's here in the Midwest. That's very, very competitive, and I mean it's hard just to make the high school wrestling team because there's so many great athletes. It's not like a football team where if you're not, the best quarterback, you're still going to be on the team.
Right.
Wrestling, it's, if you're not at that weight class or the one right above or below, you may not have a spot at all.
Right.
And then you went into recruit training for the Marine Corps. How was that experience both at boot camp and then the leadership that you experienced in boot camp in your early years in the Marines?
Fortunately, my wrestling coach was a Vietnam vet and very intense individual. A man that would eventually give me all sorts of fantastic advice. He was also one of my English teachers in the school, and he could end up. His stories were fantastic, so he motivated me and would end up becoming, because I was a pretty shy and pretty quiet kid. Even though I didn't run. I definitely didn't run around hard with anybody, and I kind of kept to myself. So when he found out I was going into boot, he goes, "Are you sure you want to go?" And then, being like a 17-year-old kid, I didn't get his question. And he had to explain to me, "Nate, you're kind of quiet, and I'm afraid you're going to get run over." And then I said, "I'm absolutely positive." And at that point in time, he knew, he was able to, because he had seen so much before me.
Yes.
And he understood what I was getting ready to get into, and even though I did not.
Right.
But after that question, he knew that's where I was supposed to be as well.
Yes.
And he wrote me a fantastic letter. He gave me one of the best pieces of advice. And, you will always meet all sorts of fantastically great and horrible people while you're there. Pick the ones that you know you can learn from and discard the rest. And that's what I tried to do.
Yes.
So there was, thank God there was more fantastic people than there was the other.
And that was some of my experience, like you mentioned, Nate, is, when you grow up here in the Midwest and you're an athlete and you're playing high school sports and it's very competitive, and then you go to recruit training in your mind, you're expecting that they're going to prepare me for death, like the worst. And, some of the requirements, to me, they were enjoyable. It was kind of like I hate saying it, but it's the fact. It was like a summer camp.
Yeah.
It was more adventure, and with some people yelling at you that you knew were not going to kill you, but having that athletic background really made a big difference. But at least for myself and my situation, I realized that it was a little bit of a letdown as far as the athletic, and then even in the early years, that drove me to like, hey, I need to take the reconnaissance indoc.
Yeah.
When I was a young enlisted Marine, because a lot of the guys that were in there, like your high school coach, told you very early on, I didn't have that guidance, that mentorship, but I realized like, wow, there's actually people in the Marine Corps they don't want to be here.
Yeah.
They're
even though they volunteered, they still don't want to be there.
Right. And that's actually quite a few.
And you end up wondering, you always ask that question, how does this happen?
Yes.
And then what do you do with the rest?
Right.
Do you motivate them? Do you push them?
Right.
Can you push them?
Right.
And if you do, what's the result?
Right. That's a lot of what we're talking about today, folks, is becoming a leader in leading and managing individuals. Some really want to continue to work hard and setting that environment so that they continue to perform at the highest level, and they're motivated and you can retain them. And then there's some people that they don't want to be there, and their concern is, what's around them and themselves. And the first time, they have an opportunity to, not be trusted, often it's going to be very disappointing. And that's kind of managing not just people, but our own expectations of how people are when you are the leader. So describe a little bit, Nathan, your early years in the Marine Corps.
Well, a little bit kind of what you alluded to. When you first get in there, you're getting trained. You go through boot, you go through MCT, you go through desert school, you go through radio school, and you're wondering, okay, what's next? And then for me, we had the flood in '93, and we had Hurricane Andrew, and then we had a bunch of time that you're waiting, and nothing's going on. And when something does go on, there's some guys that get to go do some joint task force work, and then you get then Bosnia and Somalia and all that happen, and you're not selected, you don't go. And you train, yes, and you don't go. And then once you do come back, you go, I didn't do anything.
This is his time period of his service was what some of us call antebellum, not the group Lady Antebellum, but it's before the attacks on 9/11 started. And, some of these fights that the Marine Corps was involved in, Somalia, they were in Bosnia, they were small. So we were sending, battalions or less than a battalion to some of these, involvements, and they'd go for 6 months and come back. But it didn't include all the Marine Corps, and it kind of was a point of contention and jealousy that that some units got to go and some units trained just as hard, and just they drew a straw that they didn't get to go into combat. And that's what at that time, because it had been so long, since Vietnam, people wanted to prove themselves, to do something special. And it just really wasn't coming around especially Marines like I served out on the West Coast. And people weren't going to Bosnia at all. Some units got to go to Somalia. Very few.
Yeah.
How was that with yourself?
You feel guilt,
Right.
They went, they did their part, and they risked the rest of it. They went. We all signed the contract, and we all trained for it, but they were in country,
yes,
and they did it, and I didn't.
Right.
So what do you do with that? What's the leftover?
Right.
Giving's growing.
And at that time, and I was one of those, as a young guy, we got to go and get in some combat. It was very limited, but I know some people came back and we're talking to the younger people that had just came in, and these sea stories, and I can only imagine, being one of those that was in a unit that did not deploy to war and didn't get in there, and you kind of you feel angry, but there's nothing that you can do. You can't, influence or control it. It's external friction. You just have to, hey, these people got to go, and that in larger part of our lives, whether you're, an athlete or in business competition, I mean, some things just weren't in the cards. Some people, had runaway success for one reason or another, and somebody else tried even harder, and it just didn't happen. They put in all the time and the effort, but that's just how it kind of goes.
Yeah.
Important life lesson.
Well, it is, and we all like to think that we're the absolute best at our job, and that's the whole reason of being a Marine, right?
Right.
So I didn't do this for nothing, and however, that wasn't exercised, and that wasn't a part of that. I didn't have that brother that I stood next to while bullets came in over my head. However, what do you do with the rest of that? You go home, you train, and those who come back, you hug them. And those that you can still give to, you give to.
Right. And you learn from, if somebody has more experience, like we saw going back and forth to the war. I mean, people that were over there and we were going to replace them, and we were constantly picking their brain because we were, the next in the chute to deploy right behind them. And you always, what is sad is some people that, they have that experience and they don't want to share it because it's critical, especially, and we'll get in here in a second, with your current position. I mean, people have knowledge, and you send somebody for some training and they get some specialized skill, and they don't share that. It makes the organization less capable. And, you just have that one person that has that one skill. It's dangerous. It's like having, as a business owner, if I have the majority of my accounts with one client, it's greater risk.
Yeah.
So at that time, you've been in for a few years, and what was the decision point when you were in the Marines that you weren't going to make a career out of it? How did you decide on that?
It was as abrupt as when I went in. I was on a IMA contract. I was on an individual mobilization contract on the reserves, and I was looking to go back in. I was talking to a prior service recruiter, and I wanted to go ahead and do more and go ahead and ramp up, and maybe find, if I could, find a warrant officer program or whatever I could get into. But that's what really appealed to me. And I was just took a job with Time Warner, doing some design work, and gotten quite a bit of my college out of the way, and which was tough for me. Just sitting in a classroom was brutal.
So you came back Kansas City, and you were going to school and you were working at Time Warner simultaneously.
Yes.
Burning the candle at both ends.
And some.
Yes. Yeah. And you were married at this point?
No, I wasn't. I had just met her at work, and really waffling back and forth of, do I go back? And I didn't know where to go from there. And so finally, after a couple of years, I asked her finally to go out on a date, and it became serious quick. And the revelation of she's the one. And this needs to happen. And she had a very small taste of what the Marine Corps was like. But she knew enough to know she wasn't built for it.
Right.
And she was prepared to turn and walk away because she knew that prior service recruiter was calling me, and I was now at the point that I had pushed him away so much that I had needed to make a decision right now. And I knew that, okay, she can't, and I won't, and she was the best decision. I know that now because of the results that I have. Her, my kids, and everything that she and I have survived.
Yes. So you made that decision, and that led you to. So you met your wife on the job.
Met her on the job,
and you're going to school, and then there was a period where there was a change. That first job with Time Warner, and they kind of made some business changes. And how'd that affect you?
Well, Time Warner hadn't made those decisions fully at that point in time. We did. We dated pretty quickly, packed up, and got married, and moved to Colorado.
Okay.
All within just probably about 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
When we did that, we took a job in Colorado doing the same work, system design work, designing fiber routes and radio frequency routes for cable TV and phone companies. And fantastic time. We were in Colorado right before it was just starting to boom, early 2000, and didn't have to worry a whole lot about anything. It was just her,
yes,
me, the Rocky Mountains. We would go take trail rides all the time. We would go in the car and go up through the mountains every single weekend. We had a 2.5, almost 3-year honeymoon.
Can't beat it.
No, it was great. And when we moved out there, we knew we had a 5-year plan. We knew we were coming back.
Right.
9/11 hit, and everything changed. Everybody got to see it on the TV. Everybody knows where they were at that was around at that time. You have to answer the question, am I going to go back in? Do I not go back in? If I do go back in, am I effective? Or am I going to be ineffective? Will they even take me? Will they even look at me?
Right.
Didn't do that. But the telecom world and the airline world took a huge hit after that. It was really hard to find a job, and I was too bullheaded to know better. I found another job, and that one started going down. And, thousands of people across the whole country just taking huge hits.
Yes.
I remember one of the jobs I had, an individual sitting right next to me, had 19 years in with the company, and had to pack up and move several states over just to keep his job, while he had a wife with cancer at home.
Wow.
And just a brutal, unfortunate set of circumstances. But moved back here after the telecom world still too bullheaded to know better. My son just born, and took a job. I was delivering pizza and doing commercial construction, working 7 days a week, about almost 80 hours a week, and trying to put a family together. And knowing that I still had to do whatever it took to make a job, and out of necessity, I answered an ad in the paper to go be a salesperson.
Right.
And who knew that would turn into the automotive industry?
Right.
So, and then did that for a while.
Yeah. Now it took some faith when you're working a full-time job in construction, and you're moonlighting, delivering pizzas to keep everything that the family needs, the requirements. I mean, those don't always put you in the lap of luxury, and that's hard work, and you're tired. But talk a little bit about your faith and what led you to, realize, okay, maybe there's an alternative that I need to look at. And that alternative isn't necessarily, a lot of people think that, some of these types of positions are not as glamorous as, they're older, they've got this experience in the military. Thank you for your service as a veteran. And this is after the war, and some people feel there should be some kind of entitlement to having been a veteran, but you had that faith that one, that God gave you these talents and abilities, and you're going to use them to the best of those abilities. But what was your faith and vision throughout this time period?
I had heard a saying or a phrase when I was young: you don't really know what you're talking about unless you've been to the bottom and the top at least 3 times.
Right.
And I thought, okay, well, this is one and two. And so when that happened, I just knew that something was next. But in order to fulfill a phrase like that, in order to shine, you really do have to go to the bottom and to the top.
Yes.
And you don't know what you're talking about, even if you have gone to the bottom of the top. But it is important to have pressure put on an individual. And with God's faith, that you don't know what you're talking about because you must listen.
Right.
And that's everything. Whether I went through all of those circumstances because I wasn't listening, I don't know. Or was it because I listened better? I'd like to think that one, but we'll find that out on the end of this.
Yes.
So, but in any case, you have to have faith, and you have to be. I had to be bullheaded in my situation. I had to know that no matter what, no matter how tight it got, no matter how stressful the situation, you do turn it over and you put it in his hands.
Yes. And what you're mentioning as a key point is when someone's talking, you need to be able to hear and listen. And with today's society, there's so much noise, white noise, phone, email, social media, family. There's hardly any time and place I can go around where I don't see somebody driving with a phone and just constant, being bombarded with what other people. And, that's what usually gets people in a rut is one side of advice or the other instead of, depending on something, that's bigger than us. And for me, that's God. And when you have been knocked not down a little bit, but all the way down, and you're in a situation where, you have to, determine, you're not, in the middle of it, you are at the bottom and you've got to fight. That's when, God is able to clearly communicate if you are willing to hear. So, but Nathan, your entrance into the automotive world started in sales, correct?
Yeah, it did.
And how was it? Was that difficult because you hadn't been selling before?
I've never sold before. I did telecommunications. I understood radio frequencies and fiber optics. And if you wanted to understand why you transmit out on fiber optics on a certain frequency and you want to receive on a different frequency, why those two are optimal, I can talk to you about that. I know that. I understand.
And you were professionally trained to do that.
Yeah.
But did you get professional training when you started as a salesman, or was it kind of eagle leadership, fly or die?
Jump in, both feet.
Okay.
Good luck, and we'll see how you do.
Right. So that's tough.
It is tough. And I thought, I have no idea if I'm going to do this. It didn't match. It didn't match my personality. It didn't match my profile.
Right.
But it did have, and I did well at it. The reason I think I did well is I was disciplined, and I would listen to people, and then I would adjust.
Right.
Just almost something like I was trained to do.
Yes.
So I would show up early, work a little bit late, listen to every veteran salesperson I could. I would take from those that were exceptional, just like I had been taught early on, and all the rest of the people I would discard. And did okay in it. And I got promoted to a manager, and then I got to do finance work, and then I got to run a couple dealerships and on the general sales manager side. And then the recession hit. And,
right.
And when that came, the recession hit, and those two dealerships went out. And one of them was after coming out of sales, I went into service. And then after I went to service for Saturn, and then Saturn went away altogether. So the joke between myself and my wife is, well, I've pretty much jinxed two industries. So I hope I don't do that again.
Yes.
And the economy made its way back, and I made my way back and got to promote up stayed working, advising customers through service work. So I made the switch, going from sales to service work, and really found my home at talking to people about their cars and what is it going to take to fix them, and continue a little more education with that. Did pretty well with being able to talk to people, being able to listen, and then adjust everything else. And after that, then promoted back into management again for helping people work on their cars.
Right. That took a lot of faith to, have those ups and downs and just, weather through that storm. And how difficult was that? Are there any particular moments that you recall in particular where, you were uncertain, in what actions did you take during those times of doubt?
We were at a Chevy dealership, and the call was supposed to come in. This is right when they were getting ready to shut down a bunch of Chevys. And what was supposed to happen is an owner is going to get a phone call. And when that phone call came in, you were going to get a yes or a no. You're staying open or you're closing. And we had just saw the owner get a phone call, and that phone call end up being his sister. Or a family relative, I should say. I can remember that part, and end up not being the phone call we thought. And we all saw him through the window and saw all the emotion and the anger and the disbelief, and the phone up and goes, that wasn't a phone call. Go back to work. Right. So we all went back to work, and we were temporarily relieved. And I was standing next to an individual, and his wife just lost his job. He's looking at losing his job. And I said, "Are you okay?" He goes, "Yeah, I am." And I was at a point where I'd already gone through quite a few layoffs, been knocked down at least a couple times. And I asked him that question, and his response is, "He will provide."
Right.
Nate, where's your head at? I was so mad at myself. Why wasn't that my first response?
Right.
Why had I let that escape myself? Yeah, he will.
Yes.
He will provide.
In today's day and age, sadly, there's so many, questions as far as what right and what wrong is. You're talking in the situation with the recession of 2008, almost, come on soon here, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so back then it was more economics, economic uncertainty.
Yeah.
And where did, people here in the heartland, it wasn't a booming economy. May not be as bad as Detroit, but times were tough. And now we're in the situation, it's a little bit different with the economy in, better position. But I'd say now ethically as a nation, because nobody wants to talk about God or their faith, or what right and wrong is or looks like, and that's what I believe has created a lot of confusion, is because people can't openly, and, even military leaders don't want to talk about faith or God, and, separation of church and state. It's like, well, when you're in a foxhole and people are getting accurate fire at you, that separation of church and state can go out the window. You're going to meet your maker. You better believe in something.
Yeah.
And people use that as, I think, a cop out. Those desperate times, whether it's 10 years ago, in your case economically, you have to reach out and count on something. You found God, and realize, like, hey, this was staring at me right in front of my face.
Yeah.
And now there's a lot of people with that same uncertainty. And it's ethics, whether they're at school or whether they're in a job that they're, seeing some things that are unethical going on, and they don't have that faith like you did, as far as God is going to provide. I can leave this job if I know they're asking me here at the bank or on this construction site to do some things, whether it's with the books or things that aren't right.
Right.
And I need to call it like it is. So that faith is really interesting, and that kind of led where you were mentioning, put you promoted you into position of management again.
Yeah.
In this time in service,
Right.
in automotive. Explain a little bit about that role.
Well, I had been an advisor for a few more years after that, and then worked into being a service manager. Asked to go ahead and work out managing everybody on the service side, on the technician side. To
About how many employees would?
I'm probably right around 35.
Okay.
To 35 to 40, depending upon whether it's summertime or wintertime, and who's leaving and who's coming.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and really a very unique position. Something that I love cars.
Yes.
I love the whole mechanics of it. And then the one thing that I get, because I was a Marine, the people that walk through these doors are just fantastic.
Yes.
And the stories that are behind them. Because I was a Marine, a lot of people will go ahead and open up to me. They'll go ahead and say,
Right. I trust
"Hello,
you.
yeah, you know a little bit of what I did," or I get to meet a lot of World War II veterans, Korea and Vietnam vets that will go ahead and say hello and tell me the rest of the story.
Right.
And what a fantastic position to be in.
Yes.
To be able to listen to that story and then tell them thank you, and then help them out. They're not looking for help; they're just looking for camaraderie, some answers.
Right.
What do we do next?
Right.
So,
And they trust you because they, especially other generations, they realize that bond of brotherhood that you're going to look out for their best interests.
Yeah.
And they can sense that after talking to you.
yeah. There's a lot of dealerships have had problems in the past, and some of them warranted and some of them unwarranted. But
Yes.
And everything still comes down to kind of in our business, and the best way to prove a problem or disprove a problem is always the truth.
Yes.
Whether it's a matter of their car or whether it's a matter of what situation do they have.
Yes.
You can always deduce whatever the problem is going on by what facts do you have in front of you.
Yes.
And
Now let's talk about that real quick, Nathan, because when people first come in here, when you say they come walk in the door as an employee or a potential employee, you're involved in the hiring process
Yes.
of those employees. And what are some of the characteristics that you look for when somebody first comes in and you're reading through an application, you're talking to them, and having to make a decision on whether this person has the reliability to work hard, to be trained in the way that you need them to understand, or if they have that training, to be able to apply it with the work ethics that you expect. How do you make those decisions?
the first thing we look for is attitude.
Yes.
You can't create it. You can't grow it. You can't manufacture it and ship it in. They have to have attitude. If somebody's willing to put in the work, if somebody has had pressure on their lives somewhere at least once, it shows resoundingly. If they're trying to make something right for their family, if they're trying to get off into a new career, we want to ask those questions. What is the reason for a positive attitude? Or are they going to show signs of, well, everything's been against me, and it was always somebody else's fault?
Right.
Those type of markers, unfortunately,
Right.
will mark somebody for not so much.
So that's one of the fatal flaws you see, is when somebody can't take the responsibility and they're pointing the finger
Yes.
at someone else. It's interesting that you say that. I've had some experience with people that they don't want to ever look in the mirror, and you can't fix that. If
Yeah.
they are trying to always find someone else to blame instead of saying, hey, I admit I was responsible and, things went bad and, I'm going to improve. I will not let that happen again. But, are there any other particular areas that are red flags besides, the blame game?
The blame game, in all the traditional, we're going to do the drug screens, we're going to do the background checks, and we're going to call the references.
Yes.
A lot of times the references get left off. They don't get called.
Right.
They don't help paint a picture. And
not everybody in your industry does. Not all the other competitors do drug testing. Is that correct?
All the ones that I've been with do.
Right.
I have heard, but unfortunately I can't say one way or another if they do or do not.
Right.
And that's, what an overwhelming problem we have with whether it's prescription or whatever.
Right.
It's a problem. And
yes.
If you don't have somebody that has good thought, good mind, good ability to make decisions, a lot of the other markers that we look for is what are the situations a person's been in?
Yes.
What were their responses with it? And I don't know, there's a whole big situational assessment that you take with people and having them walk through that. But, just even in a conversation about that stuff
yes.
really starts to kind of paint a picture about who the person is.
Yes. It's interesting you say that because in today's day and age, people think, marijuana is legal in most states. What's the real big deal? And as you said, some competitors, they may drug screen, they may not. You're not a social scientist taking a poll and everything, but some people can be trained in this and find work elsewhere. And sometimes an employer may think that, hey, I don't really care, but here with, German cars, you want to make sure that, it's a high standard of service.
Right.
And it's kind of a long-term, most of your customers, I would imagine, probably don't know that that's one of the standards, but why do you feel strongly that can increase the reliability of employee and their trustworthiness, and it may cost because somebody can probably leave to a different dealership or a different state and work somewhere else, which puts you in a bind.
Yeah, well, California needs people in the worst way. They will pay a ton of money for trained technicians.
Wow.
Sign-on bonuses, where sign-on bonuses here are not needed.
Right.
So, yeah, other states will call and they will say, hey, come on out and work for us. But as far as even a drug screen, and if somebody is going to have the thought process of, I'm going to leave these things alone, well, now we're showing discipline. And that's one of the number one things we need. And then if we have a driving background, and if their driving background is nearly perfect, and that's what we're going to require. We require a nearly perfect driving background. If they're going to compose themselves and able to get to and from work and not have hardly any problems or any infractions that way, more discipline. Now I'm really starting to get interested in who is this person? Do they want to do some more? And so with those types and background checks, can this person leave certain things alone? And we'll end up talking about that stuff, not as a matter of their social life. I'm not really concerned about that, just more concerned on, is this person a disciplined person? Is this person
committed to the job?
Can they do the job? Then can they, do they want to provide and work hard? And the one thing that we do want to create is the mystique of to come to work at this place. Wherever I'm at, I want to create that. I've always wanted to create that. This is where you want to come work. We have the employees, we have the tools, and we have the facility to make it a career. Yes. And we don't want to make it a job. We want to make it a career.
One thing I'd say, noticing, coming into Molly, Audi, and Volkswagen, and observing some of what goes on is it's truly like a Swiss watch around here. It's a very well-oiled machine, and you see that everyone is communicating and working together kind of with that mindset of what that customer has to do. They have a day, they've afforded this car, something mechanically is a problem, whether it's scheduled maintenance or something's wrong or they need new tires. But it is very apparent from observing that the employees all the way up to the management level that is able to be observed, has that mindset of kind of like a pit crew. People are pulling straight in, the door goes up, and keys, here's a temporary car and sign, and they're on their way. It's truly amazing to watch that, because that is what you teach in the business world, but as a business owner, it's something that I rarely see. And it's a testament to the owners and the leadership at Molly that, you're hiring the right people, and they have the mindset of both the owners who want that, exceptional standards, and then the customers, which, they have a choice. They can go somewhere else. They can go somewhere where they feel, okay, but you are looking at this opportunity for employment as, very competitive, much like, it's not, Formula One, track here, but you're trying to get it as close to, the highest quality service. It's really amazing to see that.
Yeah, when a customer comes in here, the one thing that we do know, and when we do our research, it's said that tires are a grudge purchase. Well, I would actually probably take that a step further. Every service in here, a customer, it's a grudge purchase. It's kind of weird to, even I do it, even when I'm on the other side of the counter. I don't want to spend a whole lot of money on a car.
Right.
We start weighing all sorts of questions at that point in time. Whenever I have to spend, whether it's $50 or extra, quite a bit more, is it worth putting more money into this car? Is it worth it more for a new car? And so that puts the whole mindset behind the customers. It's a grudge purchase. I don't really want to let go of that money, because what if I can use it someplace else better in a buying decision? And so we have to help rationalize that thought process. We have to, and even help them, whether it is, even if it's to go somewhere else. We don't want that, obviously. We want to make sure that we do provide the professionalism. We do provide the theories that we're trying to not only convey to our employees, but our customers. And the only thing that we have to boil it down to is we care more about that car more than the customer does. So if we care about that car, then they understand we're taking care of their second biggest investment. And so if we take care of that investment, they see that that's our goal and where we are pushing this towards, then, okay, I can trust them. Yes. And it's not such, not all my defense mechanisms are not up. And then if we say we're going to do it, well, then we better do it. And then if we don't do it, then, because we do make mistakes, and just like everything else that has a human involved in it, how do we recover from those mistakes?
Yes.
The other side of the coin.
Speaking of that, Nate, can you give an example of a time, whether, previous career or in this role, where, there was a mistake that was made, and, how you put yourself in the customer's shoes in the best effort to make that right and to really keep that customer's loyalty?
It starts with a phone call. It starts with a letter. It starts with what do I do next? Always trying to reach out until we're asked not to, or we're a great majority of the time of, okay, we can resume. We can finish thoughts and talks and see if we can't make things right. And but yeah, I mean, there's always a handful of those where we just have to plain old apologize, but you got to be willing to go the extra mile to fix it.
Can you explain a difficult conversation that you may have had with one of your employees who, had been performing, but it's been, repeatedly gone down, and what the tough talk you had to have, you're going to have to terminate this guy?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's always that conversation that comes up, and it's a matter of don't ever hesitate.
Yes,
those conversations, you don't let them grow.
Right.
Don't let it fester. Go have the conversations. Try to correct them. Wrestling coach always used to say, I'm going to push you into the state championship, or I'm going to push you right out of this sport. Same method. We will push our employees to, we're going to expect them to do well and to do their job right. And
yes,
they can't, especially with safety, especially with a customer's investment, we protect those cars. And so if we have somebody in any of the jobs, it's always a matter of lead them from the front, just like the Marine Corps.
Yes.
You go get in front of them. Yeah, you don't yell at them across the room. You don't wait, and you talk to them like a person, and you try to understand their position. Now, if their position is that this is a repeat habit, and you've talked to me 2 or 3 times, and I'm pretty much telling you this isn't my job, then yeah, it probably isn't your job.
Right.
But if you're telling me that, and you're trying to exercise better commitment, better ideas, then now we have a conversation to be held. But if it's something that it's always an excuse, and I can't ever seem to accomplish anything, and I don't have forward thinking of how to solve a problem, and it's always somebody else's fault, then it probably is somebody else's fault. And maybe we need to get something done.
Right. So Mr. Molly comes in and decides to promote you to the next level. What would those conversations you'd have with the next guy coming in to follow in your steps, as far as how to think? Is that management role, like, you have to think of the owner's understanding, because he's trying to balance inventory, and you have to communicate with the folks in parts, as well as, I'm assuming, all the frontline guys who are doing the maintenance. What guidance would you give to somebody who's taking over your position?
You always got to be training your replacement.
Right.
You have to be looking for everybody doing their job. One of the best things about the Marines was everybody knew everybody's job.
Succession planning there.
Yeah. You put it on a book. Everybody knows it. And then you have to be able to adapt.
Yes.
Somebody's going to call in sick. It's always going to be at the worst time. Somebody's going to quit. It's always going to be at the worst time. You never prepare for that enough.
Right.
You can't. But you have to have the pool. You got to create a pool of talent that you can promote up. You got to create a pool of individuals that you surround yourself with that you can trust, and you have to gain all of that from all sorts of avenues.
Right.
And you always got to be looking for what is a good avenue to get good people in here. There's all sorts of media, and there's all sorts of friends and friends of friends talking and putting it out there, and whether it's a old-fashioned newspaper, which we're probably not going to find hardly anybody with anymore, but
sure.
Conversations, customers, and customers of customers.
Right.
There's talent out there, but there's a lot of harvesting you got to do, and a lot of work, and a lot of sweat that you got to put into to find good talent. And then when you have them, you got to keep them here.
When you say that, I know when we both enlisted right out of high school at 17 years old, both of us, we joined the Marine Corps that they got in front of each other's faces. I mean, we had these things they used to call formations.
Yeah.
Leader stands up there, he's talking to the Marines, and he's communicating information. And now, in a lot of days and age, there's hey, people sending emails. Did you get that email? And not everybody's, especially in this line of work, people are on the line. I mean, they're like a grunt in the infantry. I mean, if they didn't get that word in a formation, they don't have an email. They don't have a computer terminal. So what would you say to that person taking over your role as far as the vital importance of communicating information effectively and being able to make sure that those that need that information have received it and can brief you back on what that expectation is?
Yeah, just like when we were in the Marines, we were even taught how to give a class. And when you give the class, you always do a follow-up questions.
Yes.
And if you ask the questions, they can repeat that. And matter of fact, if you can make them put it in a question format back to you.
Right.
Now you know you've got it going down the right way. Communication is everything. It's the oil in a high-temperature engine. You got to have it. You got to hold the meetings every morning with certain groups, and then you got to hold your weekly meetings with your other groups, and then you got to go make sure you go get in front of everybody that you need to get in front of to make sure that they understand what you're doing, and that way everybody above you and everybody below you understands who you are and where you're at, and where you're going. That way, in case something misses, oh yeah, I heard him say, didn't we just have a bulletin about, and didn't that, because it's always changing. I mean, there's always a new program, there's always a new technical bulletin, there's always a new recall. Did we take care of? Didn't we just hear that when?
Yes.
So it sparks the questions.
Yes. Now, Molly Automotive, they've been very supportive of the Gold Star families of Mid-America. That's how our connection is started. We for a number of years, and it's been very impressive not only to see, for these last 4 years that we've known each other, many of those same employees, there's a long-term continuity. Those employees truly do look at this organization and the leadership as this is a career that they are going to find rewarding, and they can have long-term continuity with. But the owners actually see the value of supporting those that have had severe misfortune, which are not necessarily, not any that I know of, being part of the Gold Star charity organization. They're not customers, but how important is that? What kind of value does Molly Automotive Group find with supporting those who have had that loss of a loved one in combat?
It's a fantastic feeling. Well, opportunity. It's a fantastic opportunity to go ahead and say, let's do what we can. Whether it's some of the vets that have been here that's come out for some of the programs, they can't wait. They're looking forward to it. And there's not a lot to be done for a person that has that kind of loss, except for show up.
Right.
Unfortunately, those repairs can't be made.
Right. But to know that it's not been forgotten.
It's not been forgotten. And if there's a hole that we can plug, even if it's for a moment, to catch in the mind of somebody, now we have something we can work with. And what a fantastic place to be.
Yes.
If somebody's able to give, and somebody does exercise giving, now we have a person that's looking for a company or a group that's going to grow.
Yes. Nate, what's one of the most important leadership lessons you've learned in your current assignment here as the service manager?
Communication. It's a disciplined art. More than anything else in the civilian world, and it does mirror very much the military.
Yes.
You've got to continue to communicate up, communicate down, and with your customers, internal and external customers. Keep talking.
Yes.
Why, when you have employees that see you come into an office and then you get up, you walk right back out, and you come right back in, and they're in a position of what is going on in there. It helps them to know What are the theories that you're bouncing around in your head? What are the ideas? What are the changes? You don't have to share them all, and you don't have to share it all the time. But when you do grab a meeting and you do put a group in the office and say, this is what I'm looking for, and thank you for your hard work, and I do notice whatever things are happening today.
Yes.
Let them know that and communicate it. And when you have needs or different tools that need to happen from your upper command, get it said.
Yes.
Because if it's not said, it's not done.
Those are three key points you just mentioned, Nate, is, one, being able to feel that they're important, that information comes from the top, that they're able to understand what that is, and that's a value down at every level. Two is that, that you have a system. I see, we're both Marines, and you're on Nate's, your right hand, and I can tell because you write on your left hand because you literally write onto it, or you have a board here, but you're finding ways in the reason I think there's so many things you can talk about communication, but if somebody doesn't have a system of recording that and recalling and be able to transmit that, efficiently and effectively to somebody that needs that information, some people just try to put it in their head. And I see that in so many organizations where people do not get the information, not just something nice from the boss up at the top that it'd be nice to know. Sometimes that's very, very, very important. It makes people feel valued, but some information that's critical, like we need to order this, or this person's vehicle is in this kind of condition. And, if some people, when they don't, and that's one thing in the Marines, we got in the habit of having something to write with, like a pen or a pencil, and something to write it on. And that could end up being like Nate's situation right here, his hand or the board, but being able to recall that is so critical. And the third thing that I heard you talk, and I really want to encourage the listeners of what I just said, is to encourage, to call somebody who's out as far as, hey, that performance really was outstanding. That's what we needed. That's, recognizing somebody, the value, that goes so far. And I'm imagining some of that came from the Marine Corps and your leadership that you learned there. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. Whether it was NCO school or that's, what they drill.
That's the school for the listeners to become a corporal sergeant. We send young enlisted guys like we once were to those courses to learn to be a young leader.
Yeah, whether you're going through schools and classes, but everything that we were taught, you always lead from the front. You always let everybody know what's going on, and you ensure that you have some way to recall absolutely everything that needs to get done for the day. Whether, I write it down on my hand. If it's on my hand,
it's not going to leave you.
No, it's not going to leave me, and that has to happen right now.
Yes.
Nothing else gets done until that's done first.
Yes.
And there's always a lot to be said for when you write it down, it's ingrained into your head a different way.
And I always take that whether it's I go to a restaurant or I'm dealing with, someone in the business world, if they don't write it down, some people do have an incredible memory and they can just recall that. But unfortunately, I've been let down so many times when I've communicated to somebody and, like in my case, I'm immediately writing it down or immediately scheduling, not just the time on my calendar, but the length of time and what the requirements are and how I need to prepare for that. Because those are all things that need to get done. And when people don't, fully grasp, that this is how somebody else deserves to be treated, you got to take their time and their needs into consideration. That is very important. But one of the last things before we close out, Nate, if you could tell two things. One would be, what was one of your most rewarding moments in your career here in the automotive industry? And then also one of the funniest moments.
Rewarding, I'm going to kind of go back to it. I get to stand next to some individuals that have just done some fantastically heroic work for this country. And I get to say thank you to people like you and I appreciate you, Fred. And I get to say thank you to many other customers, and whether it's because of their car or it's because of a family situation that we get to help out with, that we get to be a part of that. We get to take that opportune time and settle it right then and there, and that is a reward that is, whether I realize it at that moment or not, that's ingrained into time in one fashion or another. Funniest moments, I don't. my kids are going to be the first one to tell you I'm not a very funny man, and I sure wished I was. But fun times, the letters, the hugs, the success stories of getting somebody turned around right back on the road, and when I get to share that with the other employees, those times that you got somebody traveling in from Colorado trying to make their way to the East Coast, and they are in a desperate situation, and we get to have high fives all the way around because that family was taken care of, and they get to go finish family business somewhere else. Outstanding.
Yes.
Yeah, and the smiles that come on people's faces because of it. Truly exceptional. Just because I get to be here in this spot at this moment.
Right.
And you don't, and we're right off the highway, and so everything imaginable that happens to a car is going to happen just because of that factor alone.
Yes.
And so we get to do that. We get to handle those challenging and those tough times, and we get to do it with a smile on our face and quite a bit of hard work, and it's fantastic to do that. So it's a fun time.
Yes. Well, thank you too, Nathan, not only for your service as a United States Marine veteran, but also as a leader here at the dealership and in the community, looking out for those who have they're survivors of those who've made the ultimate sacrifice. And what an inspirational story. A lot of folks think, it's an automotive dealership, and I would not be interviewing somebody unless I, personally knew them and their skills. But, when you're in those positions to manage personnel, and as far as also understanding the customers that walk through the door and how to make an organization, continually improve, these type of lessons, which you mentioned, Nate, are just so, valuable. And, in business school, I was taught so many lessons from a lot of individuals that were in the realm of academia for so long, which is of value, but it's different coming from somebody in a dealership like here at, Kansas City or Audi. This is literally where the rubber does meet the road, and you're dealing with people's lives. A lot of times, with the service, it's something that, the words come across, and it's got to be a tough decision. You've got to replace your tires, your oil, and there's finances involved with that. But it's really the safety of the individuals that are being transported and that are out there driving on the road with you. So thank you very much for all of your valuable lessons you've learned throughout a career. The example and the testimony you've given of weathering those storms and how your faith was so important during times of uncertainty. A lot of commandos are out there and they run up against an obstacle, and it may even be not just an obstacle, but it may be an adverse situation where there's an adversary, somebody trying to take you out because they dislike you, or maybe straight out hatred. But you've weathered those storms, and when you try to do that alone, when somebody's fighting, you, or you run up against one of these crucibles of life, you're going to be in a desperate situation. And that's, in today's day and age, a lot of people don't want to, realize that, God is the one who is always, we interview a lot of doctors that have differing opinions, but, those are very, intellectual people who disagree on something simple as, the eye or the quadricep, or, just different parts of the body. And it's extremely educated people, but, to to think that we were had evolved and there's no God that created that. That's what our country is actually founded on, is belief in a creator. And that's where somebody that has, whether it's somebody who's fired or family health issue or being divorced, natural disaster, those are things that we experience in America every single day. And there's so many of you that look for those reasons. And that's what the reason we wanted to not just start the show, but bring you great guests to talk to you about their lives. And some people think that, well, that's, just, a difficult example to grasp, and it's really not. It's a person that utilized and exercised their faith. So thank you very much, Commandos, and please make sure you go out there on social media and like both the YouTube videos and the audio, and you can forward that and share it with your family and friends for all these episodes. And be sure to also go on the links when you do any shopping. You can utilize Amazon or any of the other affiliates. If you need pet supplies, we have Entirely Pets. Health supplies, we have doctor recommended. And if you're the athlete, BPI. So if you want to get healthy and utilize good natural supplements, those are high quality supplements that I personally use and recommend to you. And you can go and straight on the Go Commando website and be assured that your information is not being compromised. So until next time, thank you very much. And we got a great show coming up for you next. And the next episode is on sleep and how lack of it can affect not just your mind, memory, mood, but your overall health. So we're going to be talking to a doctor at Kansas University Medical Center. So stay tuned for our next show. Thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you.
To all my fellow grunts out there who in your youth felt it was your duty to protect us, I salute you. And thanks to the listeners of the Go Commando Show who labor on the farm, who are sweating on the construction site, putting forth your very best at the office, you are making a difference. Support the Go Commando Show in our pursuit of bringing you the highest quality professionals. Infiltrate the website at gocommandoshow.com, where you can view all of the podcasts and arm your team with incredible deals on health supplements, commando clothing, and equipment. Every time that you get a good deal, it supports the show. What deals? When you purchase anything from the website, Amazon, healthcare supplements, you're covering our six. And to the ladies on the team, when you outfit yourself in the super sexy threads from Naked Zebra, and yes, I'm talking about in fuego, you are firing the sniper shot for our commandos. How else can you support? It's simple. You smash the follow and subscribe buttons on our social media. That is how you support us bringing great guests to talk about serious subjects, not the mainstream media's fake news. So thank you, and until our next show, stay in the attack and go Commando.